Metatron shows up very often in a spaceship to me, almost like George Jetson, like a little personal spacecraft. And he came in and I just was getting this telepathic communication in hypnosis with this spaceship. And then I all of a sudden slipped into like, okay, Metatron. I'm like, oh, I know who you are. No wonder the Merkaba is kind of a spaceship when he talks about putting us in our personal Merkaba, which is an energy vehicle that we get into. It kind of spins and kind of in alternating ways. And it's a wonderful form of empowerment. But it makes perfect sense to see he uses technology that we could relate to in this physicalized world.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Ask Julie Ryan Show. It's where we blend spirituality and practicality to help you live a life of purpose and joy. We have Seph Dietlin with us on the show today. Seph's an angel communicator and energy healer who helps people live better lives. I'm interested to learn how he accesses the angelic realm, and in particular, I'm going to ask him to channel any information the angels want us to know, real time. Please remember to subscribe, leave a comment, and share this episode with your family and friends. Now let's go talk with Seph and his angels. Seph, what a treat to have you on the show today. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. So thanks for taking the time to join us.
Yes, and thanks for having me. And we sure had a lot of fun connecting before we got in here, which is great. So I'm really looking forward to diving into this chat.
And before we started recording, you said that the angels were already giving you what I call divine downloads. That's what happened to me. You got anything you want to share?
Yes. First of all, I really want to share with your audience because I'm here for you, as is Julie, first and foremost, to bring the angels and their love. Right now, it is really important to know that you are not alone. One of the biggest things that angels want you to know is that you are not alone, because this time period can feel so isolating. And I already know that there are so many of you that are going to hear that and say, the angels, through him, is speaking directly to me, because it can feel so isolating to be in such transformation right now and to watch the planet transform, to be transforming on your own, and to be in all of that. And sometimes all of the fun of your companionships and friendships, everyone else is going through their stuff too. And they aren't quite as available as we'd like them to be. And the mind can go cuckoo when it's left alone. But just know that you're not alone. You can call on your angels at any time. They're there, and they're waiting to create miracles with you and for you so that you can counteract that effect of the isolation that you're feeling right now. Because isolation is a big theme that they're wanting to talk about right now in the message that you asked for.
How do people talk with their angels? For those who've never done it before, do you have like an easy step 1, 2, 3 kind of a thing for them to be able to communicate with their angels?
So I explain it in many ways, and I teach a course on it as well as to you. And the first and best thing that I can say is angels speak to us through our heart. So the minute that we understand that we have a head and a heart, and they are wired so completely differently, that when we go into our heart, that's where we're going to be able to speak to them. Now, we can speak to them all we want, but the most important thing is to be able to hear from them, to have that two-way communication, to have that relationship with them, because I'm certain that you create lots of miracles from having a relationship with them all the time. They're great for when you lose your passport and your car keys, but having them every day, the miracles that we create, the abundance that we create with them, the manifesting that we do is amazing, but they're available to us through our heart, not our head, and definitely not through our egos. So the one thing that I always do to really up-level people into angel communication is I ask them to keep a list of things that they love. And the weird part about that, I ask them to do that on their phone. Just write love on the list. And oddly, we start keeping track of the things that we love. Or when something reminds us of something or someone that we love, we put it on the list. And when we're focused on all these things that we love, it supercharges our connection to our heart. And the next thing you know, we start hearing the subtle messages of our angels and creating miracles with them, because love is the frequency of creation. So that's the best way. Just whatever we do to get in our heart and expand that, the angels just start speaking to us naturally. And it's a language that we so innately understand. It's not like learning. Recently, I was in Portugal trying to learn some Portuguese. It's not trying to learn a new language. It's something that we all speak already.
Oh, that's an interesting concept.
Yeah.
That we all speak whatever language we think we want to learn. We're already doing it already.
Yes, but the language of angel communication is so innate in us that we don't even have to question it when we're in our heart. And things happen miraculously. I asked a class to keep that list one time, and we came in the second week, and one of the students said to me, I remembered when I was 6, I used to love to watercolor, and I haven't done it since I was a kid. She said, I went to the art store. I went and got watercolors and that special paper that you watercolor with. And I just decided to watercolor my little heart out. And the angel started talking to me so much, and all these miracles, and in fact, even some money that she needed had flowed into the equation because of that wonderful relationship. So we're going to realize that there are things on that list, and when we even start doing the things that we love, it puts us in that frequency where we're going to hear them.
Is that the same as the gratitude frequency?
Yes. Yeah, anything that just opens us up, of course, and then places our awareness in it.
And when you say get into your heart, how does one get into their heart?
The feeling. And that's the thing that we're discouraged from doing the most in the society that we live in, this so-called reality that we live in, is to be in our head, to think logically, pragmatically, not to make decisions with our feelings or our heart. We're so discouraged in this holographic experience that we call a reality from actually using the one part of us that is the most effective and powerful. So the feeling, and the way that I always describe it is that there's this warmth or expansiveness that we don't feel it physically, but we feel it emotionally. And when we tap into that subtle body, then things really start to expand for us on their own. We don't have to comprehend what's going on. It just happens.
I agree. I say emotion is the internal GPS system we all come in with. It guides us. That's how we're led. If something feels good, follow it. If something feels bad, okay, is it a real fear or is it a fake fear? And it's just an internal GPS system that we all have. But I agree with you. I think all of us are taught to be much more stoic, especially in this, in this Western civilization, perhaps maybe more. I think of the Italians, or you were talking about Portugal and, some of the other European cultures where their emotions are kind of worn on their sleeves. Think of the French, you think of the country of love. Well, it's France. It's the first thing that comes to my mind. Does that come down from the culture, do you think, over many, many millennia, perhaps? Or what do you think that's all about?
I love that you brought this up because I spend a lot of time in Hawaii, and it's a very activated place.
Yeah.
And the people of Hawaii, the Hawaiians, are a very love-based culture. So what most people don't realize is that the word ha, H-A, or the two letters ha, is for breath, but for them, breath and spirit are the same. If you think about it, when you're embodied with spirit, you're also breathing. And a lot of Native cultures believe that as we're breathing, we're bringing in spirit. So Hawaii is spirit on water. Aloha is like love. It's almost like a namaste. It's not even hello. Mahalo is like my spirit thanks your spirit. So everywhere that ha is in the Hawaiian words is actually a reference to spirit and breath. And what happens is that you live in areas where the land is so immersed with people living in a higher frequency state that being there, you're in there. It's the same like being in nature. The angels have always said to me, if you go in nature like a forest, they exist in oneness, they being the trees, the plants, the birds, everything that's there. They exist in this wonderful oneness with the quantum field, which is what we call God or the creative source. and they're in this natural, beautiful, blissful oneness with that frequency. We go in there, there is an invisible energy that takes us and recalibrates us. So the same thing happens in places like Hawaii and Portugal and Ireland and Scotland. You had a guest recently from Scotland, and she was talking about even the activation in the land from all of that as well, as I recall from the conversation.
Yeah.
And that's also active in there. When you arrive in Ireland, if you're sensitive to this, your heart just starts gushing. You feel in love with life, and you don't even know why.
And I'm going there in a few days.
Oh,
so,
I'm joining you then.
I know.
Coming here. This will be fun.
Come on.
Yes.
Come on. I love it when I land in Dublin and there's all those jets that say Ryanair on them. I'm like, oh, these are my people.
Yes.
Yeah, I love it. The thought that came to my mind when you were talking about Hawaii and the indigenous culture there, it made me think of the American Indians too,
Mm-hmm.
the Native Americans, and how I find it fascinating that those cultures are so similar and they're all in America. I mean, certainly Hawaii is not in the continental U.S., but it's still part of the U.S., but also how they've been persecuted. How their lands were taken away from them by the American government, how they've been persecuted and really horrible things have happened to them. And I think most people aren't aware that happened to the Native Hawaiians, as America was taking that over. Do you want to say something about that? And do you think that there's a correlation in that path that their spirituality has perhaps even strengthened because of what they've been through as a people?
Yes, there's a couple of really great points, because presently I'm in Sedona in Arizona, which embodies the Native American. And a lot of people will take a spiritual quest to Sedona in Arizona, and it does also have an activation. Similar to Hawaii, I find that the activation in Sedona is more about cleansing and purging. The energy in Hawaii is more about expansion and creation. So they're two different kind of energies, but they are activated by those that the land really belongs to. And yes, the entity of the United States definitely is more left brain. And so as a result of that, is not heart-centered. As a wonderful example for us all about the behavior or the actions that are taken from the mind instead of the heart. And it is interesting because this world, I'm told by the angels as I work with them in the ascension or new earth sort of themes, that this is all part of a bigger expansion of the one being that we are. And so even though we can observe what is of the light and what isn't, instead of vilifying it, we get to see its role in the expansion of the larger being that we are. And so there is a common theme there. And interesting enough, and I don't watch much TV, even though I was an actor, but I saw a show recently called The Good Place, which I had to watch the pilot to when I was writing television shows to see how that particular writer had crafted an amazing pilot. And I watched the show, and it's so interesting how many of the themes, because if anyone hasn't ever seen The Good Place, people think that they arrived in heaven, but they really haven't. They're being tricked so that they're tortured there. And each time they get tortured, they learn something new about themselves, and they end up growing and expanding, and they go through their own metamorphosis. So there is an expansion quality to the perceived opposing force in this case. And so, yes, there is something about watching the theme of those heart-centered cultures being steamrolled by a mind-centric entity. And we haven't seen the end of the story yet, because I'm told by the angels that these suppressed, heart-centered communities, cultures, will be part of bringing in the new earth.
Well, the other thing that strikes me too, Seph, which I think is fascinating, that's just coming into my head, more divine downloads during our conversation here, is Sedona Sedona is amazing. I remember the first time I went there, I kept saying, and I was by myself in the car driving, and I'm looking around going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. It's so beautiful. But the thought that came into my head, and you talked about the difference of what you felt in Sedona, Arizona versus in Hawaii. Hawaii's surrounded by water. Water's a conductive property to help energy. So do you believe that there's a some kind of a bigger picture there as far as what you feel in Hawaii versus what you're feeling when you're in Sedona or elsewhere for that matter?
Yes. And also remember, it's part of the supercontinent that exists on another dimension that we refer to as Lemuria. And so there's a lot of that Lemurian energy, but it's also volcanic and it's on the Ring of Fire.
What's the Ring of Fire?
So the Ring of Fire is something that happens geologically within the Earth. And if you go around the Pacific Rim, that's where all these volcanic islands come up like Hawaii. And so this is venting from the Earth's mantle or crust or whatever's happening scientifically there. This is where volcanoes and earthquakes and things, that's why it's a very active seismic zone. But Hawaii is created from that underground vent of volcanic activity. And on the big island of Hawaii, they're really still literally making new Earth. This is something that's still in metamorphosis. The Earth is still creating itself on the big island. It's still ejecting lava and creating new Earth. So it is massive creation from the process, which is not so comfortable, which is eruption and ejection of lava, which is much like our creation process in a way too. In this dimension, I find that when I go to the big island of Hawaii, things just massively shift, which is why I'm considering doing angel retreats in Hawaii, because you mix that angel energy with that massively creative energy of the big island, and you have magic, you have a lot of things becoming possible to create. But it literally is creation from beneath the earth there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting point. All right. I want to get down to angels. I mean, I could talk to you for days about all kinds of stuff. Obviously, I want in a few minutes, I'm going to ask you to see if the angels will real time give us, just kind of some guidance or just channel a message to all of us that are talking with you and those that are going to be listening and watching. But first, have you always been able to communicate with angels?
Yes, just not always aware of it.
Yeah. So as a little kid, did you have angels that you thought of or that appeared to you, or how do you get information from them?
I just really sense the information, and I've always been really aware. And this will speak to your audience who are the same, because being aware and not realizing it's unusual also makes us feel unusual when we're with our peers. I'm not saying we're better than, but we do understand that having a heightened level of access to awareness, we don't realize as a human it's unusual, but yet we still feel out of place when we're in our schools and such. And there's a lot of people who are listening that I'm sure will be able to say, oh my gosh, that's so true. I felt so out of place, or I even still feel out of place. I feel out of place in a world where someone would dare throw garbage out the window of their car and pollute Mother Earth. Like, where that would enter into someone's mind, plus the other things that we witness here, is unthinkable. And I'm certain that anyone who's listening to your show can relate to that, looking around going, why would somebody do that, right? So we feel a little out of place. I do remember when I was about 5 or 6, I went and I asked my mother, Mom, do you think we're just puppets for God? And what I had realized when I was 6 was I had this great moment of expanded awareness where I realized the oneness of us with the Creator. And I had a context for it. And it's been with me for most of my life, but it does come in and out. And when you're out of that whole idea of being one with Creator, it's really disorienting to be here, and it's a cause of fear. But I had realized at some point that our bodies or our beings or our personalities aren't really real, but it's something that the Creator is observing, and that we're here for that observance, but one with the Creator at the same time. And I just asked my mom if we were puppets for God. So it has come in and out of my life, as many people can relate to. And then this last time that it came in over 20 years ago, it stuck around. And then the angels came in and said, yeah, we're working together. That's our mission, because the world is going to change. You're going to have heaven on earth, which is this transmutation or metamorphosis where you're going to become who you truly are. And what we refer to as the new earth. And you, among many people, are going to be helpful instruments in co-creating that facilitating of the new earth. And when they started having conversations with me, they started filling me in the details of what new earth was. And I also sort of filled in the details of the earth that we currently live in. And I got to see things that I wasn't quite aware of before, and got to see through the veil of the false matrix. And was like, wow, is that really happening here? Ooh. And then I got to understand how the two pieces work together and how we dissolve the false matrix through consciousness and bring this in, which is the wonderful process that we're very aware that we're in right now.
All right. Well, we're going to need to unpack that here in a minute, because you just said a lot of stuff that I have questions about, because some of that was above my pay grade. So I'm going to be asking you about it in a minute. But first, back to when you said to your mom, are we sock puppets? What was her response?
I don't remember that she had one.
She was like,
looked at me.
And where did he come from? Yeah.
What spaceship left my kid here, right?
Yeah.
It was something like that.
Did you grow up in a religion? Are you coming from a spiritual home?
And actually a very Catholic one. My mom had some spirituality. Her grandmother was from Ireland. And as I suspected, my great-grandmother, she actually read coffee grounds. So she saw the angels, taught my mom about the angels. So she spoke to the angels, which I thought she was crazy at certain points when I was not so close with the angels. But my mom, if she hadn't have really been so fearfully submissive to the dogma of her Catholicism, she would have really opened up to be a practitioner like we are. I know that she had those gifts and talents. Now, she wasn't designed to do that in this particular lifetime, because since she's passed, she actually has come to me and said, no, this is exactly the way that it was supposed to be. We're not supposed to idealize what we think should have happened in our lives. Everything the way that it happened, including the difficulties that I experienced. And she also had sort of like depression, or maybe she could have been diagnosed with something. And I don't want to say what it could have been, but she had definitely lots of mood swings and things like that, where she was affected with her well-being emotionally. And she said also that was an agreement that I had. And now that I'm returned to the fullness of being, I am elated to be back home. And I learned so much from that. So yes, I did grow up and there was the energy of spirituality, of heightened level of awareness. There definitely was that in my life, but it constantly got put in lockdown from the dogma of the Catholic religion.
I was raised Catholic too, and go to Mass most Sundays or most weekends. Catholics haven't figured out, because you can go Saturday night or Sunday night. My parents, it's great. And people go, do you have to get dressed up? I go, no, I go in shorts and a t-shirt. I didn't care. God knows what I look like when I'm dressed up. I mean, it don't matter. But anyways, I think that Catholics and other cultures and religions, Catholics in particular, just because my frame of reference, they do a really good job of, as little children, teaching us about angels and saints and the Holy Spirit and stuff like that. I'm 65. I could recite the guardian angel prayer. I said it every night as a child before I went to bed. So I think that foundation being laid is really helpful as we develop into our spirituality, because people who haven't had that experience or even know about it, they're kind of starting from scratch. And I think we have a little bit of a jump start on it. And when I'm at Mass, I'm watching what's going on. I'm watching the show. I'm watching the energy. I'm watching what's happening in there. It's really fascinating. And I laugh. People might think I'm really irreverent because my eyes are closed. That's not what's going on. I'm watching the show. It's fascinating. when I'm in different churches and seeing what's going on. Does everybody have this ability to communicate with the angels?
Absolutely. They are our guides. They were assigned to guide us. And when I originally asked to open up the two-way communication link so that I could hear them, I reasoned with the divine God, the Holy Spirit, that if they're here to guide me, they can't really guide me if I can't hear their guidance. And that's their assignment, is to be able to guide us. And they can't very well do that if they are unable to establish a two-way communication link with us.
So you were doing a deal with God? Is that what you're telling us?
Oh, yes, I was. At the moment that they came back in, I was like, dude, okay, I've had enough of this place. I'm going to go to sleep and you're going to take me back. And no reference to gender. Sorry about the dude statement. That was way back before we were aware of this. But I said, look, I'm done. I don't want to be here anymore. And then the minute I let that out, I was like, yes, I'm not going to get that granted, am I? You're not going to give that to me. I said, then fine. I was a real estate agent at the time. So literally, I gave God a counteroffer. So I literally did. I said, that's fine if you're not going to take me, then give me my angels. I want something tangible. I want to talk to them. I want to hear them. I want to see them. I want to feel them, everything. And actually in that moment when it happened, I felt touched by them. I felt the presence of the energy around me. My dog and cat looked around. They could perceive them there. And I heard something come in through my knowing say, Seph, everything's not just going to be okay. It's going to be better than okay. You'll see. And the peace that overcame me had nothing to do with my own ability to shift myself out of the extreme level of panic that I was in and into a place of peace and bliss. It was beautiful. And I know that it happened via something divine that took place within me.
So God gave you an offer that was way over the asking price. There were benefits in it, right?
Now there's multiple offers for that because where the whole world is in escrow, right?
There you go.
For the great awakening.
There you go.
Yes.
Do you think along those lines when you said, okay, God, I don't want to be here. You know, you gotta give me something to basically hold on to. Was it that surrender thing that allowed these abilities to really be enhanced and come online for you? Do you think that's what went on?
In this case, I would love to say that there was some personal trait within me that opened that up. In this case, I really believe that I took a tiny step toward the divine and it came the rest of the way toward me. And there's a statement that says, if you take a tiny step towards the divine realm, it will take a quantum leap to meet you face to face. And that is true. And for anyone who's listening to this, you know, there's not a lot of hard and fast rules that you have to do in order to actually be in unity with that created you and loves you so very much in an inconceivable way. Even just having this conversation with me, even just having this conversation with you, I am overwhelmed this whole time with those tears of joy coming through, which is that unity with Source. So that field of energy is here with us in this podcast and activating your audience, which is so wonderfully beautiful that we can be used as instruments for this. But in that case, no, there was no wonderful personal trait of surrender, which I can do now. And I know when it's time to do it, when the external reality is kicking my behind, right? And then I know, I think I better do some surrender. And if I don't remember, I'll usually pull some oracle card that'll have surrender on that. I'll be like, that's right, got to do that now. But in this case, I do believe that that instant was one of those ones where I just took a tiny step toward the Creator and the angels. And it took the rest of the journey to me as a way of lovingly embracing me in that moment. And that can happen as well.
I love that. Well, tell us about your technique. What do? Just go, hey, Archangel Michael, and then you connect to him? Or what do you do? Do you like twirl 3 times on your left foot and raise your right hand? And, what are you doing to connect?
Yeah, maybe 20 years ago when I was a lot more fit, that was probably an available option to me. But at this point, I find that just going into an altered or heightened state is more natural. So interestingly enough, the angels guided me into the modality of hypnotherapy. And what I understand through hypnotherapy, because most people think it's mind control, it's not. It's an opportunity to bring the hemispheres of our left or pragmatic side with our right or our hearts and our spiritual side, bring them together so that they're in unity and they can create this experience in unity. When that unity is disconnected, then of course we have our anxiety, we have our panic, and we have the physicalized world gone amok way to the other side. So the ultimate state of being is in that what we would call hemispheric synchronization or heart-mind cohesion. And that's also what's referred to in spiritual text as the holy marriage of the masculine and feminine energy, which is the pragmatic mind or the ego with our spirit or higher self. So as we do this, that bridge between right and left hemisphere becomes bigger and stronger. And I don't know that I'm ever in full beta, usually at some varying form of alpha. I'm sure you can relate to this. We're operating in a world where we're not ever that often in that full waking state without some access to consciousness. So right now, what happens is that just from being dipped into some level of heightened consciousness or having a good forged connection over time as it's evolved, and that's the journey of spiritual development, is that it is the act of bridging the right and left hemispheres and forming new neural pathways. Literally, scientifically, we're doing that, forming neural pathways to keep the right and left in unity so that they're working together. And this is where we can manifest. This is where we create things because it's our human being, the puppet, working with the divine, which is the puppeteer. So when we have the two in connection, we need to do that. And so I get to hear them speaking in all kinds of ways. And if I really want a deep conversation with them, I do go into a trance or a heightened state. I don't really consider myself an angel channel as much because I don't take over my body. I'm more of a communicator. So I speak to them telepathically. And then I actually do have a friend who takes me into hypnosis and I have conversations with them there, but they're just longer and more detailed conversations about the nature of the universe as such. But in order to speak to them every day with all that guidance, the angels, the archangels, it's literally just being in that heightened state or that expansive state of mind, being in the heart.
Yeah, I do the same thing.
Yeah.
I raise my vibrational level, communicate with any spirit, whether it be an angel or a dead grandma or whoever, Elvis, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And then just have a conversation telepathically. You bring up an interesting point, though, too, about vibration. And what I teach, and I'd be eager to hear your take on this, is it's not so much about technique, and I think you referenced that a minute ago. It's more about being in the vibration and being able to reach it, because spirit doesn't communicate on the I feel crappy channels because the vibration's too low. And so I think it's really important, and to your point also, that with practice, we're able to do this more easily because we can get into that high vibration. We're tuned to the angel channel instead of tuned to the NBA channel or something, at a different frequency. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, that's so funny. When I do teach angel communication, the first module is all about tuning in. And they like to use an analogy of like the radio station. And for those of us who remember when we would turn the dial, there was a different frequency. So early on when I started communicating with them, the reason they shared with me that I was able to hear them wasn't because they had suddenly appeared to me, but because I had actually gone into a range where it was available to me. So in much the same way that I could be on 102.7, if their frequency is on 105.9 or 106.9 or whatever, then I tune the dial. So if I'm not tuned into 106.9, they can certainly be broadcasting at me, but I'm not going to receive the signal. And what they mentioned was that the love, that's why they gave the love exercise, is because what that did is that actually moved the dial so that we were up in the frequency. So just by focusing on things that we love, we activate our heart, or we activate frequency where we're in that range. And then we can really start to hear them. They can always hear us. They're always watching us.
Right.
But we want to be able to hear them.
Yeah. Yeah. I do want to have you, have a conversation with them. But I got a couple of questions for you first. Are there specific types of angels, and do those specific types of angels have different roles that they play? Can you tell us about that?
Yes. Well, first of all of the angels are part of a field of oneness. And I heard an analogy recently that I really resonate, because most of the time that I've been working with the angels, I've been working with them as a voice of oneness or a field of oneness, the angels. And it's all of the angels. They exist in unity, and there is no division within them. And we have archetypes.
No hierarchy, basically.
Right. We have them as a way to understand them, or to understand that level. But that's more for us than it is a fact about them. Now, for the longest time, and I go by experience and what that experience reveals, because there's so much that's out there that's available to absorb like a sponge and then to parrot it back. So what I like to do is I like to share my experience with the angels. And then when people hear that experience, they can replicate that experience as well. And so for the longest time, I've always worked with the angels as a unified entity. And it was suggested at one point that I start working with the archangels, or with the angels in certain entities, as in their archetype or their personality or what they're assigned to do. And I took on that project through a divine set of circumstances or miracles that lined me up to begin to start investigating through my own communication link what it was like to speak with these archangels. And what was revealed that I found very fascinating is that what we know them for is sort of information that's hidden in plain view. And what I mean by that is that even though the angels are truly a oneness of consciousness that is the closest to the purity of the creative source, it's been described as the first layer of the onion as the creator expanded itself. So here's the creator in its purest form. The next layer of purest consciousness is that oneness of the angels, and then so on and so on as it expands out and expresses itself. And when I started working with the personalities of the angels as an archetype, I started revealing that within those archetypes was new understandings and new ways that we can bring that field of oneness, having a relationship with these unique traits that's all combined in the oneness. And I'd love to use a couple of examples if you'd like to hear it.
I was just going to ask you for an example.
Yeah. Great. So first of all, we know Archangel Raphael as the healer. Okay. Now, interesting enough, in my conversations with him, since we've started, healing isn't about fixing something that's broken. It's about realizing that it was in a perfect state to begin with. So Archangel Raphael is not just about healing like we know him for, and he is, but he's here to help us tune into the variation of ourselves that is already healed. So what he explains is that if we have something like a disease, a financial situation that's difficult, he doesn't come in and bring his magic and make it go away because it's real. What he does behind the scenes is that because there's multiple variations of us in different timelines, that he tunes us in with the variation of that is already free of that disease. And so he also helps us manifest as well, because manifest is manifesting, or conscious creation with the source is actually identifying with that variation of us that exists simultaneously without the encumbrance of whatever it is. And I can use a very real example, which is kind of incredible, because I had something that was going on with my car. The parking sensors were freaking out. Every time I put the car in reverse, my car was going, and I was going to take it to the repair, to the service, and have it addressed. The angel said, how would you like to do this consciously? And I said, okay. And a couple days later, a friend of mine who was really distressed in a situation had this thing that happened to her. And I really felt for her. And I dropped everything on my calendar that day. And I went to go be with her and be of service. And I reversed out of her driveway. My parking sensors were working normally, and they have ever since then. And I was in Sedona at the time. She was in Phoenix, about a 1.5 hour, 2 hour drive in between. So when I was driving back to Sedona, I was already in that expanded state, which we get into to be of service. So I was also driving, which is also mesmerizing, at night in Arizona in the desert. And I had this long conversation with the angels, and they basically explained to me that they had used the situation to demonstrate how we move through timelines. And in this case, what I had done was, by abandoning what was important to me and selflessly going to be of service to my friend, I was operating at the frequency of the Creator. And so I had heightened my frequency. And what I had done without knowing it is that I had moved myself into a different variation of reality. Not just an improvement of the reality that we live in. We literally take offline the old one and bring online the new one. And if you want to know what Yeshua was here to teach us, it was to do that. He understood that, as did the other greats. And so what they had told me was that they didn't repair my car. We don't get rid of cancer. We take our awareness into a dimensional variation where it's not there to begin with. So when I started my car, I was in a new reality, and my car was a different car. This one did not have the parking issues. The parking sensors issues.
I've never heard of that before, but it makes total sense. So say more about that, the multiple variations of self you had called in a minute ago. So give us some more information on that, when there's like a healing, I do a lot of energy healing on people. When there's a healing, what's happening, as I see energy coming in these crazy old analogies at times. Like, I may tell you your elbow looks like whipped cream, and I'm watching the whipped cream get melted and it phase into your bone. Is that what's really happening? No, it's a metaphor. It's an analogy of the energy healing that's happening, that's repairing whatever it is that's bothering you. Is it, do you believe, or is it possible? Certainly it's possible. Is it that in doing that energy healing is putting us into a different, would you call it, a variation of ourself? Is that what's going on? Because
Yes.
there have been many instantaneous healings, and I never say, this is not me, this is spirit working through me and with me to help you heal yourself. Nobody heals anybody else.
Right.
So is that what you believe is going on?
So what I can share with you that would be relevant, as opposed to believing on my personal perspective, I'll tell you what the angels have shared with me and how I've pieced it together for now.
Okay.
So
yeah, great.
When I originally started working with them, I had a conversation in an energy healing session with Metatron and Raphael. And at that time, they told me, as a healer, there's a couple things that you should know that are paramount to this. One, we're not fixing something that's broken. We're here reminding you that it wasn't broken to begin with. And then they said, what happens is that when you bring in love, you bring in the creator. And when you bring in the creator, that high frequency moves you into the variation. They didn't really explain it with a lot of context at that time, but they helped me to understand that the frequency or the transmission in love is the potent healing force, because we're bringing the divine into the equation. And they also said, it's like when you have a cold and someone who loves you very much makes you chicken noodle soup and you feel better. They said, it's not really the soup, it's the love that went into it that makes you heal. And in that case, it was an expression of love. They literally made you soup, an act of intention with their love that you speed through the healing process. And you drink the broth, and it's the love in that soup that makes you speed through the healing process. And you're back in a variation of yourself because the love lifted you in another variational frequency, another frequency variation. And we do it so subtly. We've been doing it so subtly all along. Now, here's another thing that you're going to love that'll probably blow your mind that I discovered recently. And so we know that we're here to remember that we can create through spontaneous creation. And when I started working with the Archangels, suddenly these feathers started just materializing in thin air around me. And there's a time that I was at a restaurant. Someone walked past the window, and out of my right eye, I just saw they were wearing a sweatshirt that just said Angel. And just then, a feather materialized inside the restaurant right in front of me and just dropped right down to my lap. And we like to know that we're on a journey of awakening or getting into this sort of, they're using the word pyramid, this kind of higher parts of the pyramid where we're creating from our intent and doing that, right? And so we wouldn't have to go to the store to buy something. We would just create it. Wouldn't need money, wouldn't need to do that. We would just create it with the power that we have inside of us that we know the creator gave us because we are one with it. So we have that creative power in connection with. When my conversations with Gabriel, which we know is about communication, and we know that Gabriel is a communicator, and he mentioned that our lives are sort of like living in our own movie and of our own creation. And then he went into how we use what he has to manifest or to create, because it actually brings us closer to self-realization. And he mentioned to me something that kind of blew me away. He said, you know, you all are waiting for that time when you can just materialize things out of thin air like those feathers. He said, but I got news for you. You've been doing it the whole time. You've just created these little transactions as a way to amuse yourself for now and to falsely convince yourself that you don't have that gift. Whatever you've manifested at the other end of the transaction, you falsely accused yourself of not being able to manifest it by materializing it because you followed a chain reaction of a transaction that occurred. But that transaction is from your manifesting too. And he said, the minute that you realize, you're going to start seeing things come to you quicker. In other words, without the elaboration of a transaction, meaning what's my credit score, what's the interest rate, and all these other encumbrances, because they are encumbrances. And within 12 hours of him making that, a friend of mine called that I hadn't talked to in a little while, hearing that I was about to go to Sedona for a little while, and I was looking for an Airbnb, and I put that task down because I was guided to. And she called and said, hey, my condo is on the market. It is vacant. Feel free to use that instead of getting an Airbnb. So 12 hours after Gabriel explained to me that we're already manifesting by magic, even when we conduct a transaction in what people call the 3D world, we're creating that transaction in the same way. And he said, pretty soon, because you're not really that amused by those transactions anymore, you're just going to cut right through them and get right to it. And 12 hours later, I manifested a place to stay. And of course, I'm doing some other things for this person, picking her up at the airport, doing some energy work with her and things like that, which is wonderful. And I even offered to pay her. She said, no, just pay the utilities. But it was interesting because it wanted to present itself in a way where what I was looking for was a place to stay. And it came without me having to pay Airbnb to get it.
Well, and I think that all of us have experienced wanting something and having an idea of how it was going to unfold. And at the end of the day, we got what we wanted, perhaps in a circuitous route or path.
Yes.
What we still got the end result.
Yep.
And it was nowhere near what we had envisioned the path was going to be. But that's a great example, I think, with you manifesting that place to stay in Sedona, of being open to how's it going to unfold. You put that idea out there, and then I always say that God and the angels in the universe, they're all conspiring to do us good if we stay out of the way and we say, hey, can we do this? And then it unfolds, and most of the time unfolds in ways that are magical and fantastic. And we look back at it and we think, oh my goodness, this was amazing.
Yes.
How this worked.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so back to the different types of angels. When you have a request, do you have requests like for archangels and requests for your guardian angel and a different request? Like, are there categories of requests for certain types of angels, or is it all just angels in general? And when you ask angels in general, is that just we're all a fractal of the divine, whether we're an angel or a spirit guide or a human or whatever? How do you think all that relates?
Right. So I just tap into it as a field of awareness and referring to it as the angels. And that's one of the ways that actually helps us realize that it is a part of us that we're always connected to. And so there are many different ways that I serve others with this, and many ways I hadn't, like you said, had even seen coming as a way of doing that. One is with hypnotherapy. So I bring people into a state where they connect with an archangel or some angels. And it's interesting because those angels will show up visually much differently. Even when I go into hypnosis and communicate with angels, sometimes they'll appear to me way different than the statues make them look. And then they are always quick to tell me, like Gabriel one time, he said, I can appear this way to you because I don't have a physical body. And when he came to me, he was pretty cool. He had like a leather jacket and tattoos, and he had this he was very charismatic. And he likes to pop into my car every once in a while. And then when he does, the satellite radio goes and the song is by Gabriel or Gabriel something, just shows up randomly on my satellite radio, and he starts talking away. But with some of these, when they show up, when people meet their guardian angels, it's very interesting because it'll show up in whatever way visually conveys the story. They aren't that visualization. And I hate to break it to us, but we're not even the visualization of what we see in the mirror. That's part of our experience too. We're not even that. But interesting enough, and this is a cool story to concretize that. So when we go in, I actually just open the door and hold the space. I listen and I hear the guidance, and they're all completely different, and they are what they're supposed to be. I had a client one time who was making a journey from one part of her career right now to what she really wants to do. And she's having trouble, like many people are right now, trying to find out where's that bridge to cross and how do I cross it? What do I do next? So we took her into hypnotherapy, and we went in and we met one of her angels. And it was a woman dressed up in a business suit, no wings, no nothing like that. We didn't go to the Akashic Library, which we often go to in hypnosis with the angels. They'll take us into the library, show us our book of life, and show us scenes from our life. But in this case, we were in an enchanted forest. And then the next thing you know, we got to the clearing in the forest, and it was a skyscraper, right? Which would be chaotic for a lot of us to see a skyscraper, but it was great. It was symbolic of her career move, which she didn't know she would get. The angel took her up to like the 43rd floor, glass offices and a big view from the top, and sat in a boardroom and gave her all this angelic instruction about what she's supposed to do next. And she had so many ahas and revelations. But I've had people go into a cabin and find someone dressed like a farmer. I've had people go in and see, for example, outlined figures and things like that. And then I've had people go in and all of a sudden, out of the blue, a deceased loved one will come in as one of their guides. And then they start crying tears of joy from unity with that person. But when I do what I do, I am in the ultimate state of surrender, and I just listen as I guide people through whatever it is, whether it's a reading or teaching a class or answering questions or bringing them through their higher mind into the experience. I'm just guided. And it's cool because when I do the hypnosis, I'm in the field with them, and I can often see what they're seeing, but I'm not supposed to say stuff. There's sometimes I said, do you see that vase over there? And they're like, the blue one? I'll be like, yes. Sometimes I'll see it like that. And then sometimes what will happen is the angel or other entity will ask me to tell the person to ask them something rather than relay the information directly. I'll say, why don't you ask the angel this? And they'll ask and they'll get the answer directly from the angel, which is much more impactful than if I said the angel is telling me this right now. And it's exactly a match, right? So there's so many different ways. And it's good because it has variety. One, because I'm a Sagittarius and I never take the same route to the gym every day. I always take a different route, but it's fun because everything is completely different, but it's a reminder that there's no formula. It's just the act of meeting people and listening to above and then just being used as an instrument. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what they took
yeah,
me.
very much so. And
Yeah.
and I teach the same thing. I'm a Catholic schoolgirl. I picture angels with big wings and, cascading beautiful curls coming down to their shoulders and a rope belt and barefoot and that kind of thing. But is that what angels really look like? Absolutely not. They're going to show up in a way that we can understand what the energy is. And when you were talking about seeing them as somebody with tattoos and stuff, it made me think of sometimes they show up like Denzel Washington, like in Preacher's Wife, and that was an angel that was there to help them. And also one of my other favorite movies is how spirits show up, in different forms. Contact with Jodie Foster, that old movie from the late 70s. And she's on a different planet, and there's a spirit that shows up in the form of an alien, and he looks like her deceased father, and he looks how he looked when he died when she was a little girl. Well, they're going to show up in a way that makes sense to us, whether it be an angel or a deceased loved one or whomever, and it's going to provide comfort to us.
Yeah. Metatron shows up very often in a spaceship to me. So one of the first times that I encountered Metatron in deep conversation with him, as opposed to just calling on him and talking to him, one time I was having a conversation and it was telepathically in a spaceship in hypnosis. And all of a sudden it's Metatron talking about the false construct of time and how it holds up every other false construct in this world, and how through conscious ascension or frequency rising, we pretty soon transcend time, which is ultimately where the dissolve of the false matrix will come from. So all the corruption that you see and all that kind of stuff, it's in a dissolved state right now, but consciousness and that frequency is pulling the rug out from underneath it because the false construct of time is compacting, or it's becoming one, where we're in that one singularity of time. And as a result of that, all of that other stuff is actually disintegrating because it stands up, or it's reined in by that. And Metatron came in on a very interesting spaceship. It almost looked like George Jetson, like a little personal spacecraft. And he came in and I just was getting this telepathic communication in hypnosis with this spaceship. And then I all of a sudden slipped into like, okay, Metatron. I'm like, oh, I know who you are. No wonder the Merkaba is kind of a spaceship when he talks about putting us in our personal Merkaba, which is an energy vehicle that we get into. It kind of spins them kind of in alternating ways. And it's a wonderful form of empowerment. But it makes perfect sense because he uses technology that we could relate to in this physicalized world.
What's a Merkaba? I don't know that word.
Yes, the Merkaba is the shape. And so a lot of times you see something that it looks like two pyramids that are inverted like this, and they spin around, but the pieces of it, so the pyramid goes this way at the top, and then the pyramid goes this way at the bottom. And this part at the bottoms of the pyramid stick out on either side. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 around here. You'll understand it's, and then it's what makes Metatron's cube. So that's Metatron's cube.
Well, it looks like the Star of David, with a bunch of light points on it, and then there's a grid of almost like a sphere around it.
Yeah, and actually, when you Google the Merkaba, you'll understand what I was describing, even though I probably didn't do a very good job of it. But it basically fits in us where our arms are in the piece of it where looks like the bottom of the pyramids intersect, and our head is in this top, and then the other part of it goes below our feet. And we imagine ourselves in the Merkaba, and it actually frees us of negativity. It helps us heal, and it helps us move up timelines. It's one of those things, again, like he said, when the paste turns into jelly in your bone, it's something that we can visualize, even though it's quote unquote not really happening, but it is.
Yeah. Well, and you just triggered my memory. I wanted to ask you about the pyramids real fast, and then I really want you to see what the message the angels have for us. That pyramids are energy generators, in my opinion, and many of the great pyramids of the world, not only in Egypt, but in Hawaii, there are pyramids here. There are certainly the Aztecs. They're in America. They are all over the world. And they are all set up, and I need to have somebody on the show because I'm fascinated by this. They're all set up on latitudinal and longitudinal lines, and I believe they're energy generators, and many of them have water flowing through them in the form of like a stream or some kind of water, even through all these thousands of years. And I believe they're energy generators, and people get healed when they go into the bowels of a pyramid oftentimes. And I believe that's what happens with both you and with me and our graduates of our classes and many others that are healers, that it's energy like in a pyramid that's being generated from spirit through us to connect in with the person with whom we're working. And they end up being able to heal themselves because of us being the conduit. Does that make sense?
Yes. Michael talks a lot about pyramids, and we don't even have to be in them. Very often they can even appear. It's the same way we could say, butterflies start appearing. Sometimes we see the real ones, but sometimes we see them everywhere on a bus and an ad and everything. And we know that butterflies are appearing to us. But he said the same thing is happening when we're in a pyramid ourselves. We don't have to necessarily be in the pyramid. Sometimes we'll just see pyramids that'll start showing up through synchronicity as well, as one of the things Michael said. And by the way, I have a wonderful person to connect you with who knows all about the Bosnian pyramids that were discovered buried underneath there. So I'll talk to you about that offline. You can connect with her. And that is one of the qualities of these pyramids, because when they got opened up and people went in them, strangely, they started getting healed from all of these different things. So there is definitely an activator in that. And that's one of the things the angels have been talking about too. Yes.
Right. Okay. Do the angels have a message for us?
Yes. First of all,
about anything and everything, certainly about the time we're living through and all of that.
They want to start off the message by saying, get excited, celebrate. because there is so much fear and negative energy that is available to be consumed. And certainly it can lead any or all of us into a false belief that something very negative is occurring in our reality. The total opposite is true. Find your tribe, find your community, connect with like minds, listen to this podcast, have expansive conversations, because they want you to be in that expansive space, in that expansive state, so that you can see what they see. You are about to discover that you have powers that you couldn't possibly imagine to create, that you have well-being that you couldn't possibly imagine that you have, that you are abundant beyond your wildest dreams, and that you already have this abundance. And this process of transformation, as tricky as it may seem, is getting you there, and be prepared to be dazzled by what you experience. And for many of you, you may already be experiencing extreme challenges in one area and extreme miracles in another area. Expect those miracles to expand as well, and see those challenges as a portal to those miracles and the ability to create. Get excited is what they say, because the reality that you live in is about to be up-leveled, is being up-leveled in present tense in a way that you can't possibly imagine. And your actual experience is being upgraded as we speak.
Does that have anything to do with, especially here in America, we're in the middle of a presidential election? Does that pertain to that as well as everything else? You know, my God, you watch the news and it's just so depressing about all of that. Do they have anything that they want to tell us about that whole situation that's going on for people? I talk to so many people who are wound up about all this stuff. And I say, turn off the news.
Yeah. Well, that's what they say, is don't give your power to it, and don't give your power to a person. There's not one person that has the power to do anything. Personal sovereignty and unity is where this is all going to. Everything that's centralized will be dissolved. Everything that doesn't have a heart will be obsolete. So if it matters to you which candidate wins the election, that would be a very difficult path for you to take, because you're in a state of mind that is lower in frequency. But if you realize that this is taking us to a space where we won't have a power construct like that at all, because we will evolve to the point where we won't need it, get excited about that. And if anything, this is a narrative that's playing out so that humanity can decide once and for all that it's ready to take its power back.
Wow, wonderful. All right, last question. I could talk to you all day. Last question. Why do we incarnate?
We created a reality that made us falsely believe that we are not who we are, only so that we could rediscover who we are and realize who we are as the one creative divine being. And we did that because we couldn't possibly know what we are unless we had created a perceived opposite or opposer of what we are and experience it by contrast. And that rich discovery allows us to be fully alive in all dimensions, all at once.
Yeah. When we know what we don't want, it helps us create what we do want.
It sure does.
As humans, right? People say, well, I just want everything just to be good. I go, well, first of all, that would be boring. Second of all, we've got to shatter the old in order for the new to come in. When I was in I was probably 24 or so, I had a girlfriend who was quite a bit older, like 25 years older. And I'd be dating somebody and maybe wasn't going well. And she'd say, that guy is just Kool-Aid. And I'm saying, well, what's that mean? She said, how do you expect God to fill your bucket with Kool-Aid or fill your bucket with champagne when it's full of Kool-Aid? You got to empty the Kool-Aid first. And I think that's the shattering, is we've got to empty our buckets of the Kool-Aid in order for the champagne to come in, or whatever your preferred drink is.
Oh, the container.
And yeah, the container. Well, you are absolutely charming and fascinating
You
and
as well.
so wise. And how can people learn more about you and your work?
Just go to my website, which is talktomyangels.com. That's myangels.com. You can reach out to me, explore what I do. I create community and teach courses, do readings and hypnotherapy. And thank you for having me here.
Oh my gosh, what a joy. All right, everybody, that's it for today. Sending you lots of love from Sweet Home, Alabama. Mwah! And from Arizona, too, where Seph is. We'll see you next time. To enhance your spiritual journey, click on one of the videos below and remember to subscribe, leave a comment, and share with your family and friends.